Okay.
He's trying to figure out what we do with darkness.
Okay. Sponsors. All right, we'll start with sponsors and we'll see it when the other guys get on board. Year of Learning, Dr. Paul Koningsberg, in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Koningsberg, Shimon Reuven ben Labish, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nissen Hara Nissen ben Fardosa. Paula and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malka Mann, in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi. Friends of
Uh-oh. Ready?
Uh-oh.
Already?
Uh-oh.
Glitch. We got a glitch.
Toby Paris, Saratova bat Yisrael Dov. A week of learning. Okay.
No. Haven't heard you lately.
All right. You hear me now, though, right?
Now good.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. We had was almost a breach in our Zoom line. Okay, a week of learning by Michael and Judy Poretsky in memory of his brother Avram Ben Gershon. Minnie Shavrik, a week of learning all those we lost in the past year. Siggy and Lala Bessler, in memory of his father Dov Berish Ben Meshulam Fivish. Yossi Peleg Bilig, in memory of his father Meir Ben Shmuel. Herschel and Mira Sennett, in memory of his mother Reitzah bat Yitzchak Yaakov, and her mother Shosha bat Avraham Halevi. Today also a day of learning plus Suda Shlushi's Front by Bruce Deutsch in memory of his mother Ella bat Dov Wolf. A day of learning by David and Ann Klar in memory of his mother-in-law Hartzka bat Shmuel Feivel. Also David and Ann Klar in memory of his sister-in-law Chaya bat Moshe. Also day of learning by Rabbi Moshe Kranzler in memory of his brother Chaim Shmuel ben Rav Yerachmiel. Shamas Havin Aliyah, Kranka Rafia, Velti Yashir, Shamat Leah, Chol B'nai Yisrael, a good gebenched Yar. And we'll add tomorrow a day of learning by Joel and Sally Flamholtz in memory of his father Yisrael David ben Alexander. Shamas Havin Aliyah, Kranka Rafia, Velti Yashir, Shamat Leah, Chol B'nai Yisrael, a good gebenched Yar.
Amen.
And Rabbi Kranzler is also pleased to indicate that there was the birth of a new great-granddaughter.
Oh.
So if you see him in shul or around, you can wish him mazel tov as well. Okay. All right. Now, we did a little bit on Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, right? Yesterday, so that we would be okay in terms of the time for today. So we should be fine. Okay. All right, again. Okay, so we're going to pick up on Lamed Daled Amud Aleph.
Okay.
Where we said was the discussion of Rav Ashi's statement that in order to be able to take kernels, wheat kernels, and use them, they were boiled first, which made them detestable, disgusting, and then could be thrown into the fire and used for kindling, no different than bread. Okay, that was Rav Ashi's statement defending Rabbi Yochanan. So that's where we ended up, where Rav Ashi said, B'shlikata umeista,
Usla.
right? That they were also boiled up and therefore they were disgusting.
Right.
Now, what happened here is that we now continue in the Gemara. It's actually about 8 lines down. First word is Abaye, right? Not the regular Abaye, okay? But we're going to get another discussion on Truma, that's Tameh, and it relates to what Rabbi Yochanan said earlier. Okay? All right. Abaye bar Avin, okay? And Rav Hanania bar Avin. Okay, interesting, just as an aside, one of them has smicha, one of them doesn't. Okay? That they were both members of the base midrash. Right? Tanu, they taught as follows. Trumot, what did they do? They taught issues regarding truma and tractate trumos in the academy Bei Rabbah, the academy of Rabbah. Pagabaho Rava Bar Matna, one of the students, one of their chaverim, colleagues, came to them, met them, and said to them, Amar Laho, that's right, Mai Amritu Betrumot Debe Ratmar. What was said today in your shiur, okay, of regarding Trumos in the academy of the master, okay, in the academy of Rabbah? Amrule, they said to him, Umay kashyalach. Well, what problem do you have? In other words, you wouldn't ask the question if there wasn't an issue regarding Tahoros or Trumos that you wouldn't ask us. Amar Laho, he said to them, Tnan, we have a Mishnah that teaches as follows. Shtile Trumot Shenit Ma'u. The plants or the saplings that are of Truma that became Tameh. Vishatlan, and then you replanted them. Tahorin milatame. They are tahor from continuing to transmit tuma. Va'asurin mile'achol. But that same truma produce is forbidden to be eaten. Okay? But truma. It's a question about whether that needs to be there. So continuing on then, since it implies from this Mishnah that such plants, truma plants that have been replanted are tahor from conveying tuma, amai asuri mile'achol. Why are they then prohibited from being eaten? Okay. Lay, he said to them, okay, Hachi Amar Rava. This is what Rava said. Mai Asurin. What does it mean when we say that they are forbidden? Asurin Lazarin. They are forbidden to non-Kohanim. Umay Kamashmalan. So what then does it teach us? Gidule Truma, Truma. Okay? That the growths of Truma maintain, I'll say, or continue to be in a status of Truma. Okay? Tanina, and we learned, Gidule Truma, Truma. But we've already learned, in a sense, okay, from elsewhere, perhaps a different Mishnah, that the growths of Truma continue to be considered truma, right? V'chitema gidule gidulin, and maybe you want to say that it's talking about the growths of the growths of truma. Umay kamashmalan, and therefore, what does it kind of come to teach us? B'davar she'ein zar'o kala. We're talking about a situation where the seeds of the produce don't disintegrate into the soil. Okay? In other words, there are certain items, like onions, for example, that you plant the whole item back in the ground. Okay? And that's where it grows. Okay? There is no seedlings that become disintegrated or spread or open up, burst, whatever, when they're in the ground. Okay? So the Gemara now says to us, Hanami Tnina. But this also we've learned, right? Namely, we've got a following statement. Okay? Doesn't tell us immediately whether it is we can assume for the moment that it's a Mishnah. Okay? Hatevel, regarding untithed produce. Gidulav mutarin, the davar shazar kala. Okay? That this untithed produce, its growth is permitted when it is something that the seed perishes as part of the planting. Okay? About halfway on the Amud on Lamed Daled, Erwin. Okay? Shazar Okala. Aval b'davar she'en zar okala. But in a kind of produce where the seed does not disintegrate, where it's not, the seed doesn't be demolished for the purpose of growth. Kala, afilu gidule gidulin asurin ba'achila. Even the growth of that tevel, of that untithed produce, is forbidden for eating. Ishtiku, the two of them were silent. Amarle, so he said to them, Midi shamia lach baha, is there something that you've learned about this? Have you heard anything, an explanation of this in any way? Okay. Amar lahu, he said to them, Hachi amar Rav Sheshet. Okay, this is what Rav Sheshet says. My asurin, in this example of tevel, of untithed produce, where the seed doesn't, where the seed bursts, we said it was permitted to eat. And then where it doesn't, it says it's forbidden. So Rav Sheshet is saying, what do we mean when we say it's forbidden? Asurin lekohanim. It's forbidden to the kohanim. Ho'il ve'ifsalu laho behesech hadat. Why? Because these produce, I'm going to say, have become pasul as a result of a lack of attention, because of inattention. Now
What page are you up to?
ask the question again.
Please tell me what page you're up to.
Okay, we're on Lamed Dalet Amud Aleph. Okay, about halfway down.
Thank you.
Okay, we're just, if you see the Tosafot where it says Taharu,
Okay, I'll find it.
we're about 5 or 6 lines below that Tosafot.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. So why does Rav Sheshet, he's saying in this Mishnah, this produce is considered forbidden for eating by Kohani. Why? Ho'il ve'if.
Uh-oh.
Is it you?
No, I don't think so.
No,
Rabbi Green,
I
all
don't
right?
think so.
We lost him, huh?
Is Rabbi Green all right?
Yeah, he
It's
just
his
frozen.
computer.
He just disappeared.
He lost his contact.
I hope that's all.
There we go.
Lost contact with you, Rabbi Green.
I don't think he has us yet. I don't think he's back yet.
He's not saying anything.
Staying connecting.
Reconnected. Okay.
Okay, welcome back.
All right. So what happened? All right. Hanecha, he says, Laman da'amar hesechadat, pasul haguf have. That's acceptable to the one who says that the lack of attention, okay, it can become invalid through this inattention, okay, on the part of truma, just as with other kodshim, just as with the korbanot, okay. Elelaman da'amar hesechadat pasul tuma have. But according to the view that says that lack of attention renders the item tame, okay, it's a difference, of course, right? My ikala memar, what are you going to say then? Okay. The itmar, as it says, hesechadat, regarding a lack of attention, right? What happens? Rabbi Yochanan Amar, pasul tum ahave. According to Rabbi Yochanan, okay, this lack of attention does more than just render it invalid, pasul, it renders it pasul and tame as well. Okay? Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Omer, pasul haguf have. But Rav Lakish says it becomes invalid, okay? The truma itself becomes invalid, okay? In this case, Rabbi Yochanan Amar, pasul tuma have, okay, says Rabbi Yochanan, she'im yavo Eliyahu v'yitarena, shom'in lo, that if Eliyahu comes and renders that item, whether it's the truma or even the korban, right, and makes it tahor, fine, good. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Omer, pasul haguf have. He argues that it is the very essence of itself, tameh, right? And what happens? She'im yavo Eliyahu v'yitarena, ein shomin lo.
Really?
When we don't listen to Eliyahu, and it doesn't become
Isn't
tahor.
it difficult?
What?
Is that not difficult?
Sure,
Ain't
we
you know?
render the Kohen Tameh, right? That's part of the problem. Okay. So what happens? Okay. So it's not only pasul, but it's also tameh, and that's why it's forbidden for consumption by the Kohen. Okay. Tive. Okay, but we see now what's going to happen. Rabbi Yochanan la Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. He challenged him, and he said the following. Rabbi Yishmael beno shel Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer. He says as follows. Lul katan haya ben keves lamizbeach. There was a slight gap, okay, between the ramp and the altar, right? The outdoor altar. B'ma'aravo shel keves, right? On the west side of the ramp. Shesham hayu zorkin psulei chatat ha'of. that they used to put there or toss there or hold there, hang there for the meantime, any kinds of chatas bird offerings that became pasul, invalid,
That you couldn't use.
right? And what happened? V'tu'uvbar tsuratan, and their form changed. They became decayed. V'yotzein lebeit hasrefa, and then afterwards they would take them and bring them to the place of burning. I amrat b'shlema pasul tuma have. If you're going to say that it's acceptable that we say like Rabbi Yochanan, okay, that it was simply a situation that they could become tameh as a result because of lack of attention. Okay, mishum hachi ba'i bor tzura. Excuse me. For that reason, we say that therefore they must be allowed to change their form, become decayed before being burnt. Shema yavo Eliyahu v'yitarena, lest Elijah come and render them tahor. Ela I amrat pasul haguf. But if you're going to say that their very nature is now invalid and is tameh, like Reish Lakish, lama li ibor tzura. Why do we need to wait to burn them if they're pasul korbanos for any change of form, any decay? Vahatnan. And aren't we taught elsewhere in a Mishnah? Okay, in this case, it's actually a Braita. Okay, Zehaklau. This is the following rule on the top of Lamed Daled, Amud Beis, guys. Shepsulo begufo, that when there is a invalidation in the very essence of the item itself, Yisaref miyad, it should be burned immediately. Bedam uba'alim, if there's a pasul in the sprinkling of the blood or the collection of the blood, or in the owners, to ubar tzuratan, then one waits, right, for the appearance of the korban to change. V'yotz'in lebeit hasrifa, and then one brings it out to the place of burning. Amar le hai Tana. So they said to him, Reish Lakish responding back to Rabbi Yochanan, that particular Tana, Tana debe Rabba bar Abuahu. He must be a Tana, all right, namely Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, who's teaching according to the academy, okay, of Rabba bar Avua. The Amar, who says, Afilu pigul ta'un ibor tzura, that even in an example of pigul, okay, where the korban becomes pigul because of an inappropriate thought or concept or, right, on the part of the Kohen, that also requires a change of form. Now, Eitive. So I challenge this with the following Braita. Nitma, if it became Tomei, O shenifsal habasar, or the meat itself became invalid, O sheyatsa chutz leklaim, or that for some reason the korban went outside, literally the curtains, which we mean, of course, outside the temple precinct, right? Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yizrok. Rabbi Eliezer says it's still permissible to sprinkle the blood. Rabbi Yoshua Omer Lo Yizrok. But Rabbi Yoshua says it's forbidden to sprinkle the blood of that korban. Umodeh Rabbi Yoshua. But Rabbi Yoshua does acknowledge She'im Zarak Hurtza. Okay, that if the blood were to have been sprinkled, it is acceptable. So the Gemara asks, "My nifsal." What do we mean when we say it became invalid? Lav behesech hadat. Aren't we talking about here about the possibility of it having become invalidated due to a lack of attention on the part of the Kohen? I amrat bishlema psule tuma have. If you're going to argue, as is the case of Rabbi Yochanan, when we say that it is that the korban or ultimately truma becomes tameh, hainu de mishkachet la de martziei tzitz. But that's precisely where we find the main purpose of the tzitz, which comes to atone for any kind of korban that becomes tameh. Ela I amrat pasul haguf have. But if you're arguing like Reish Lakish, that it is a invalidation of the very object itself, amai hurtza, right? Why is the korban after having sprinkled to be considered acceptable? And notice in parentheses tzitz, the question of then what is the purpose of the tzitz? So we ask again, nifsa, my nifsal, what do we mean when we say it becomes invalid? Nifsal betvul yom. We say it became invalid because it had contact with someone who was a tvul yom, okay, who had entered the mikvah that day, but was still, all their tumah was not removed till nightfall. Ihachi, if that's the case, hainu tameh, isn't that the same as being tameh? Says the Gemara. Gemara answers, trei gavne tameh. There are two kinds, or two varieties, two types of tuma, answers the Gemara. One type is tuma where it renders other objects tameh. In other words, it continues to transfer the tuma. Okay. What about the second variety? It invalidates other objects, but it doesn't impart tuma. That's the case. Now, Gemara continues. The following, right? Statement. Ki salik ravin. When we get a little different, a digression a little bit here. Okay? Ki salik ravin, when Ravin left, in other words, and he went to study in Eretz Yisrael from Bavel, Amra l'shma'ate kame de Rabbi Yirmiyah. He recited this particular lesson before Rabbi Yirmiyah. Now, just a quick word that Rabbi Yirmiyah, remember, was originally from Bavel himself, but at a young age came to Eretz Yisrael, learned all of his Torah then, okay, from Rabbi Abahu and others who were direct students of Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yirmiyah was considered one of the Gedolei Hador in his generation, okay? So he says to Ravin, who was a, let's say, later emigre from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, Bavlai Tipshai, those foolish Babylonians, he says, Mishum diyatve ba'ara dechashucha, because they dwell in a darkened land, Amritun shma'atata demachshachu. They also, he says, recite murky, dark teachings. In other words, they're not clear in what they teach. Okay? Lo shamia lechu, he says, wasn't it ever taught or learned among you, had the Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, mishmei de Rabbi Oshaya, that which was taught by Reish Lakish in the name of Rabbi Oshaya. Okay? And this is going to deal with the following, and it's going to make a comparison in a moment between water that was drawn for water libations and somehow became tameh versus the truma, and it's being planted in the ground because of what can be done to the water that was in the pail drawn from the shiloach for the libation that became tameh by immersing it into a mikveh. And this is what he tells, is explaining to him.
How does it
May
become
the water, may hachag, water that is used for the libations on Sukkot, right? Shenit ma'u, and that water libation that was drawn, right? Okay, with a lot of fancy, all sorts of ceremony and things like that for the Sukkot holiday. And that water became tameh. Okay, what do? Do you go back and redraw fresh water? Okay, with all the, again, repeating all the celebrations? Or isn't it easier to take that water in a pail, hashikan, lower the water into a mikveh, such that it becomes in contact with the mikveh water, and they mix, and as a result, okay, that is acceptable. Va'achar kach hekdishan, and then afterwards, you consecrate that water, tahorin, then that water becomes tahor and usable for libations on the mizbeach. However, in this case, we're taught at the same time, hikdishan, if they consecrated that water and it became tameh, ve'achar kach hashikan, and then tried to lower it into the mikveh for contact with the mikveh water, tme'in, that water that had been drawn for the libation initially remains tameh. Now, michde, granted that this is the case, he says, zriya minhu. This is similar to our example of planting the shtalim, the plants, okay, of truma items, okay, replanting them. Mali hashikan, va'achar kach hikdishan, the same way that we put them in contact with the mikveh water and then afterwards consecrated them. Mali hekdishan, v'achar kach hashikan, the same way that they were consecrated and then afterwards made into contact. Alma, therefore, ein zriya lehekdesh, and therefore we say that in regards to our example of the shtalim, of the replanted produce, okay, that replanted produce that was tameh cannot become consecrated again. Hanachanami ein zriya letruma. Here too we can say that therefore there is no planting, okay, of that item regarding the truma as well. Now, Gemara goes into another slight digression. Okay, still dealing with our basic themes though. Yativ Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi was sitting. V'ka'amar la lahashma'ata. Okay, he was also repeating and learning this particular lesson. Amar le Abaye, and Abaye says to him as a challenge, Okay, right? And asks really, Hekdishan bekli ka'amar, aval bapeh lo avud Rabbanan mala? Do we say then that when they consecrated that item, okay? In other words, the water in the pail, was it done really in a pail, in a utensil? Is that what we're talking about? But they did not consecrate it verbally or orally, okay? And that was not done by the rabbis, and therefore that's not any kind of a upgrading, a significant stringency, or dilma, or perhaps bapeh nami avud rabbanan male, or perhaps the rabbis, when they consecrated it, did so orally, verbally, and therefore that also allows for an improvement in status, okay? A upgrade, a stringency. Amarle, he said to them, Zu lo shamati, that I did not hear, I didn't learn. Ki yotzei ba shamati, but something similar to it I did learn. The Amar Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Abahu, excuse me, said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan the following: Anavim shenitma'u, okay, if there were grapes that became tameh, darchan, one can press them, stomp them, right? Va'achar kach hikdishan, okay, and afterwards consecrate them. Tahorin, okay, they are considered tahor. Hekdishan, va'achar kach darchan, if one consecrated them and then processed them, right? Stomped on them, pressed them, tme'in, they're considered tameh. Vaha anavim, the kedushat paminhu. But as regards to such grapes, their sanctity could be done by verbal or oral statement. Va'afilu hachi avud rabbanan mala. And in that case, the rabbis would still be, so to speak, raising the quality, upgrading, making significant astringency to such grapes. Amar Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef, Anavim ka'amart. You're saying an example with grapes? Hacha ba'anavim shel truma askina. Here we were dealing with grapes that were truma. That's what we're dealing with. The kedushat peh didho ki kedushat kli damya. That making them consecrated orally, verbally, is the same as making them consecrated using a utensil. Avalhani, the bai kli, but these others that require, in other words, the water that requires a utensil, bapeh lo avud rabbanan ma'ala. Orally, the rabbis would not have used a oral consecration as a way of upgrading the status, of improving them for astringency. Darchan afilu tuva. But when you say that one can press them, okay, does that mean even more than a minimum amount? Umi amar Rabbi Yochanan hachi. And did Rabbi Yochanan really say this? V'ha'amar Rabbi Yochanan, but did not Rabbi Yochanan actually say, Anavim shenitma'u, okay, these grapes that had become tameh, dorchan pachot mikebetza, that when they're pressed, each time it must be less than an egg volume. Ibayat ema. If you want, I could say, Hacha nami pachot mikabetza. Here too, when they're pressed, each time it's less than an egg volume. V'bayit ema, or if you want, I might say, hatam dinagula ho barishon. Okay, that there, right? That there was a person, okay, they came in contact with somebody who was basically a Rishon, had only had Tuma, okay, was from a Av Tuma, and then they could transfer it, right, to the grapes. Dahavalaho in Husheni, that as a result, that's going to make those grapes basically second degree.
Agreed, right.
Okay? Hacha. Here in our case, what are we talking about? Dinago b'sheni, that they were touched by something or someone who was already a second degree
Not
tuma,
the first.
and as a result, the havulaho shlishi, that they became third degree, and therefore they can't transfer any more tuma. Right? And food can't, certainly on a third degree level, food can't transfer tuma to another food stuff. Now, Amar Rava, says Rava, Af'anan nami tanina. So we also learn as follows, namely the following. V'natan alav mayim chayim el keli.
Kelly.
Okay? When we cite, right, this pasuk, right? Okay, when he says, right, that pasuk, and he shall place upon the ashes living water in a vessel, right? That's what the pasuk means, right? Shetehe chayutan bekli.
Lee.
Okay, that the water must be, I'm going to say, living. In other words, water must be in a flowing status when it goes into the utensil. Vinatan, and when he says you place it, right? Alma tlushin ninhu, that we say that it must be water that's detached from outside of the spring that are put into the vessel. Vaha mechubarin ninhu, but the spring itself is considered attached. It's still flowing in the ground. Okay. So what happens? Let's, as we roll over a little bit, ela, rather, ma'aleh, but rather here, okay, the rabbis raised it to a higher standard, if we want to call that astringency. Okay? Hachanami ma'aleh. Here too, they raised it to a higher standard, astringency. Okay? And what happens? Okay? At this point, the Gemara is going to continue with another example of a Braita, okay, where there is something raised to a higher standard, astringency. And that's where we're going to stop right here. Okay, on the top of Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. Okay, so everybody have a good day today. Let's keep in mind the meaning of the day of Asara B'Tevet and its significance, uniqueness, being only occasion where actually we do continue to fast as we enter Shabbat as well, and wish everybody a good Shabbos in addition.
Shabbos, Ken. Good Shabbos.
Shabbos. Shabbos. Thank you.
Shabbos, everyone. Shabbos, Rabbi. Have a great day.